No, this is, I guess I get so passionate about it because I really very strongly believe that this is the right way to be going. And, I think the shitcoiners have really damaged this whole space. I think we'd be further ahead if there hadn't been the Sam Bankman-Frieds and all the shitcoin fraud. That, when I talk to a lot of gold people and try and convince them that Bitcoin's a better choice, probably the number one, a couple of objections. One of them is it's not physical. I can get around that. I explain that it's a ledger. But the other one is that, you got all these frauds in it, all these shitcoiners. I mean, and I get it. It's easy to throw it all in the same bucket, but this is different. It's a technical innovation that's not a fraud. And so I think people need to.
Hey guys, welcome to Everyday Finance. The long-held 4-year cycle narrative that has produced huge post-halving rallies has been challenged by Bitcoin's first red year after a halving in more than 10 years. Supply shocks caused significant upside in previous cycles, such as 2013, 2017, and 2021, but this time the anticipated increase did not occur. According to Lepard, this represents a structural change brought about by diminishing returns and the transformation of Bitcoin from a merely speculative asset into a macro asset. Capital seems to have come earlier than normal, price movements are less dramatic, and volatility has subsided with the introduction of spot ETFs and more institutional participation. When Bitcoin breached its peak prior to the halving in early 2024, it was clear that this change had occurred. This effectively pushed ahead future demand and leveled performance through 2025. As a result, the previous pattern of one bad year followed by 3 robust bull years is clearly broken, signaling the start of a new market period.
They're both a play on the monetary debasement. And as we didn't put up Jesse Meyer's chart, but as we all know, there's 900 trillion of financial assets. The gold market has gone from, used to be about 20 trillion, now it's 27. Bitcoin market's still at 2. So that's the other thing that's interesting. It used to be the case that if Bitcoin did a 10 bagger, it'd be the same size as gold. Now Bitcoin's got to go to 1.3 million to be the same size as gold. And, and why isn't Bitcoin, bigger than gold yet? Because there's 5,000 years of history and, a lot of people still just don't quote unquote get it. They don't believe in what this is. But, as we talked about a moment ago, more and more people are coming to see what it is. The ETFs, the BlackRocks, the Treasury Secretary, the President. I mean, there are just so many, the corporations, the Treasury, Bitcoin Treasury companies, there's so many touch points that just continue to suggest increased adoption. And so unless that turns around, or unless governments get responsible, another good chart that'll be in my presentation that will be on my web, on Twitter, in a week, is just the power law and the path to 1 million. And, just staying on the power law, not deviating above it or below it, we get to $1 million Bitcoin in 2032. So, now that's 7 years away, but if you do a compound annual growth rate on that, that's a damn good investment. It's hard to find that kind of a return anywhere else. And I think it's, relatively certain and relatively low risk, but obviously people can have different opinions. You can differ with me on that, but so I'm quite comfortable holding it. So for those who are unfamiliar with the power law, and it's laid out well in Fred Krueger's book, I mean, you're looking at historical Bitcoin prices, log of time, log of price. And if you do that, what they've done is they look at the data against that model, and there's a 95% R squared. If you had statistics in college, you learn that if there's a series of numbers or things, if there's data that tracks with a 95% correlation, when X goes this way, Y does the same thing 95% of the time. That's a very high level of correlation. So it's a model that kind of helps you to guess where, by looking at where Bitcoin has been, it looks at where Bitcoin is likely to go, assuming that model holds together. And all models are flawed, but some of them are useful, somebody once said. And I think there's some possibility what you're describing is an interesting thing. And some people have said, well, the power law is definitely going to dominate. It's going to work for the next 20 years. I'm not sure I agree with that. The way I look at the power law is it's a very useful model that shows what's happened in the past, and all conditions being equal, it's probably a pretty good predictor of where we're going in the future. The all conditions being equal part, I think, can be influenced by human psychology. And so, if at some point, and I've studied hyperinflations, and hyperinflations are kind of like avalanche or Titanic events. There's a critical state that kind of exists and then it breaks. Think of an avalanche. The snow keeps falling. Finally, it breaks, boom, all at once. The Titanic, it's floating, starting to sink, boom, it goes to the bottom of the ocean. So these are kind of critical state change events. And I think this, and hyperinflation surround, okay, you trust a currency, like in Weimar. Suddenly it's like, no, we don't trust the currency. And everyone comes to the same conclusion. It's like a fire in a theater. I got to get the hell out of here. And so that's a critical state event. And so what I do believe could break the power law to the upside is if at some point in the next 10 years, they're printing so much fiat so quickly, it becomes so obvious that everybody and their brother says, I got to get out of fiat. I got to sell every single dollar I get and buy Bitcoin or gold or real estate or food or, whatever, buy something real. It's what they call a crack up boom, right? If, that's all driven by Gresham's law. The money is failing, so you got to get out of the money. If that kind of event occurs, it's like you say, it'll be suddenly, and the power law won't hold. We'll just break through the ceiling of the power law and just keep going, because really you've got a currency death event. And is that a possibility? Yes. I still kind of rate that as a tail. I mean, I don't have that as my base case at all. I think more likely we just have a lot of inflation and then we eventually reset. But it's not a zero tail. And I mean, a few years ago, I would have thought it was like a 1% tail. Now it's maybe like a 10 or a 15% tail. It's getting more likely, as things deteriorate, right? So
what do you think?
That's how I see it. Yeah, I'm a little torn. I mean, this part of me says hyperinflation, tear off the Band-Aid and restart, but that's not realistic. And that's probably so painful and unfair. And you got the chance that it leads to a war or some madmen gaining control. I mean, there's so many terrible, unpredictable outcomes that I don't think anybody can really ever root for that path. I think the more realistic and hopeful path would be we trend in that direction and it gets bad enough that we intelligently avoid that and reset it all, based on a knowledge that this is bad and it's got to get fixed. I think that's the better way. And there'll be pain in both of those. But it's interesting. The pain will be different for different people. I mean, if you're older and you can't go back to work and you had a fixed income and, you had bond savings, well, boy, you're in trouble. I mean, you got crushed. If you're a 30-year-old plumber and, you own your house and you have a mortgage, you don't have a lot of savings, but you got a very useful skill that people will always need. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so you get to pay off your mortgage with worthless money. And you maybe for some period of time things were pretty rough because the society was a mess, but the new money comes in and everyone self-organizes, and guess what? People still need plumbing services and they pay you in sats. And the great thing is, those sats will buy as much food in a year or 2 years as they buy you today, because inflation will be gone. So and you got your whole life ahead of you, and you can plan and save, and things will be so much better. And all the productivity enhancements and improvements that we've been enjoying, the benefits of those won't just go to the people at the top who are controlling everything and raking off their own share, in the system that they've got, right? The benefits will be more evenly distributed. There'll be a fairer wage for working people. Do you know what I mean? Because again, there won't be the ability of the financial sector to take advantage of honest work. So, it'll be a whole lot better. It really will. And so therefore one could argue, let's go fast, but from a societal transition point of view, look, it'll probably, I think the way it's going to happen is probably the way God wants it to happen, probably the right way for it to happen, which is it'll get bad. I'm sure there were moments in World War II when things were awfully bleak and there were a lot of people dying, a lot of people suffering, but there was an end in sight and they fixed it and they reordered. And then there was actually pretty good times after that. At the time they were terrified of nuclear war and so forth, but in general, the 50s, 60s, 70s were, a period of health and growth and life improvement for most people. And I think that's what we'll go back to once we get this problem solved.
Lepard highlights the connection between gold and Bitcoin within this new framework, contending that gold frequently moves first as an indication of monetary stress, with Bitcoin following as liquidity and confidence increase. Instead than being driven by retail excitement, Bitcoin's behavior is increasingly reflecting macro factors like real rates, currency devaluation, and institutional flows as it gets more integrated into global portfolios. This clarifies why, in spite of compelling long-term narratives, price activity has been relatively muted. Bitcoin is solidifying its position as a store of value asset that reacts to wider monetary trends rather than experiencing spectacular growth. This is paving the way for potential future expansions that are more fundamentally driven, slower, and more steady.
That's not being a doomer. That's just being, it's like, you prepare, right? You got to prepare ahead for, to protect yourself. But I'm incredibly optimistic. I mean, the technological advances that we've enjoyed are just so fantastic, and they're going to continue and get better. What's really broken are the man-made, government and financial structures that are something out of the 19th and 18th century that just don't reflect, what we need to go forward. I mean, we need micropayments, we need instant money transfers, we don't even need banks as they currently exist. We just need we need to start all over, scrap this whole thing and just start new with a clean sheet of paper. And that's what this will bring. And I think the productivity and happiness and health and all that it's going to be amazing. I mean, think about it. Think about if you didn't have to worry about wars. I mean, think about if you didn't have to worry about inflation. Think about, what I mean? It's like, I think probably, in my view, one of the biggest existential threats that people worry about is running out of money. Do you know what I mean? I think everybody in the world, it's just kind of it feels like it's a constant, fear that everybody kind of to some extent lives with. And if you knew that you had a sound monetary unit that you could save for the future and that would increase in value over time and allow you to have a long time preference life, I think that would just really improve everybody's mental health and psychology and well-being. I mean, I know being a Bitcoiner has made me happier and calmer and more optimistic and more positive. I mean, in spite of a world with a lot of bad shit going on. I mean, we talked earlier about the Charlie Kirk thing. I mean, privately, it's just, there's so much bad shit going on, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. There's a way to get to a better world. There really is. And, you and I both believe it's Bitcoin. I think the world's going to come to agree with us, but, we're obviously in the early days and we're trying to convince people. And that's why we're writing books and doing pods. We're like, come on, guys, you're missing it here. Let's wake up and pay attention because, there's a way out of this mess. So that's where we're at. That's really true. And it really does, once you get involved in it and that's why I tell everybody, the only wrong number is 0. I don't care how much of it you buy, just start buying it and studying it. Because you know what happens, you go from there to being a crazy raging maxi like me, you know what I mean? Because the more you learn, the more you're like, wow, this is right. This is good. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, it's like it's a great awakening. It's a great human awakening that's taking place. And it's really fun to be early on in that whole process. And then to try and help other people to see what we can see right now, or what we believe right now. So, Jordan, it's all good. I mean, it really is. It's all good. And, I hope people will take the time to study it. People will take the time to read my book. People say, well, what can I do to make the world a better place? I think it is educate yourself, protect your family. And then once you feel like you understand this thing and try and spread the word, because good ideas they spread by word of mouth, just like, hang on a second. I now understand something I didn't understand. I think I see a way where this is going to get better. I got to tell my friends about this, and then of course, not all of them will listen. Not all of them will read the book, whatever. Fine. Some of them will. And then they'll tell their friends and they'll tell their friends. Pretty soon, everybody will be going, this is the way we should do it. And that'll be that. It'll be over. That'll be great. And we'll have some other problem arise, but we can deal with that later. I mean, we'll have to worry about AI getting more intelligent than us and being a threat to our existence. Fortunately, I think that's quite a ways down the road. Exactly right. When people ask me what they can do, I just think it's just spread the word. That's all. I mean, we all, you're right. I mean, none of us, I didn't set up the Federal Reserve. I didn't set up the government. I didn't start these wars. I didn't do any of this shit. But I'm one person and I could write a book And it's like, I love Peter's line, you can just do things. It's like, and you can. And, if once you understand it, if you truly believe it is a better idea, as you and I both do, all right, well then why keep it a secret? Why not, you want to see a better world? Great. Let's get everyone else to agree with this vision of the better world that you and I hold, Forward to seeing you in the years ahead. And I'm happy to do this whenever you like. And, we'll just keep hodling on. And, the book, just so people know, the book is available on Amazon. It's hardcover, paperback, Kindle version, and there's an audio version. It's 13 hours. I have a website called ema2.com, which is my firm. We publish a quarterly newsletter, which is free. We'll never spam you. You can sign up to receive it. And more or less, it talks a lot about monetary debasement and gold and Bitcoin. And then I'm on Twitter and I make a lot of noise. And sometimes I even get into Twitter wars and people say stupid shit. I'm kind of at that age where I just can't tolerate bullshit. And it's like, I see bullshit. And my wife says, you just shut up. And she's probably right. but I see people doing stuff that's just not right. I mean, there's some guy in Britain who, said all Bitcoiners were shysters, and that kind of set me off. And then more recently, some of the shitcoiners have been talking about how all these shitcoins are better than Bitcoin. That set me off. And it's just like, no, this is, and I guess I get so passionate about it because I really very strongly believe that this is the right way to be going. And, I think the shitcoiners have really damaged this whole space. I think we'd be further ahead if there hadn't been the Sam Bankman-Frieds and all the shitcoin fraud. That, when I talk to a lot of gold people and try and convince them that Bitcoin's a better choice, probably the number one, a couple of objections. One of them is it's not physical. I can get around that. I explain that it's a ledger. But the other one is that, you got all these frauds in it, all these shitcoiners. I mean, and I get it. It's easy to throw it all in the same bucket, but this is different. It's a technical innovation that's not a fraud. And so I think people need that.
Additionally, the change in Bitcoin's behavior has rekindled criticism of businesses who significantly rely on BTC to support their balance sheets. Peter Schiff has intensified his criticism of Strategy, claiming that its focus on Bitcoin exposes investors to greater losses in weaker cycles. Schiff asserts that the company's sharp stock drop in 2025 would rank it among the poorest performers if it were included in significant market indexes. He further refutes Michael Saylor's argument that Bitcoin belongs in corporate treasuries. This analysis comes after Strategy's most recent Bitcoin acquisition, which increased its holdings while also increasing risk concentration. Although the company emphasizes robust Bitcoin yield metrics, detractors contend that when examined over longer periods, those returns continue to fall behind more conventional options. Collectively, these discussions highlight how the evolution of Bitcoin is causing companies and investors to rethink expectations, risk, and the place of BTC in a more macro-driven market environment.